every one of us as Americans have to live the truth of the Declaration of Independence. To be the president in the year where we are celebrating the 250 years of that is just a golden opportunity. Talking to people about the rule of law, letting people understand that the faith and confidence in the judicial system trumps everything is so important. The checks and balances in the Constitution is so pivotal to democracy. And that is the joy that it just, I never shied away from an opportunity to be able to speak to the members of the bar, to speak to communities all across the state. So that's the highlight of my year.
Welcome to the first episode of Season 2 of Leading the Bar. I'm your host, Amanda Arriaga, and with me again is Patrick Palace, NCBP President.
Amanda, this is kind of a big day. This is the day we kick off the first episode, Season 2. So first, congratulations. We got a Season 2.
Hooray.
Yeah, right. And the second thing is, this is the first time, you are revealed. Everyone gets to see you in this episode, and they get to see the way you look at me when I say things that you're like, did he really just say that? Seriously? And now everyone's going to see this.
Well, this really was a love fest to you and your home state bar. We have your executive director, Terra, Nevitt. Yeah. We have your current president, Francis Adewale, and you, the glorious reigning past president of all time.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, this did feel kind of like a big warm hug, I have to say. And that's a fun part about this podcast. But to me, when we were done with this and, mics were off, I just had to sit with some of the things that Francis said. His story of being kind of an outsider, looking in at what it means to have democracy and freedom and how important lawyers are. And his story was so inspiring. I am so glad we captured all this on both film and audio because everyone should hear Francis's story. I think it's so inspiring, and it really is a view that, it takes you a different place and makes you appreciate what's going on in bar leadership and how to be a better leader. It's amazing.
Yeah, Francis had so many wonderful things to say, but I loved that the takeaway that I heard from him is he wanted to invest in the bar that invested in him. Because it's true, not all lawyers feel like the Bar Association is the place for them. And so kudos to Washington State for making him feel that way, and then for him to reinvest in the bar.
And the other thing that was fun, this is for those of you who are really give me some takeaways, give me some things I can write down. Washington State is a mandatory bar, and they are doing things that I think other mandatory bars have been concerned about doing or worried about doing. And when you hear the things they're doing, and then you're hearing how they do it, it is a blueprint for how every mandatory and voluntary or affinity bar can take and run with the programs, the process, the thought leadership from this bar. And I loved how they kind of unwrapped the thought process about reinventing bar leadership.
Well, and I think this is the episode, whether you have a really solid bar that knows what it's doing or one that's a little bit fledgling. My favorite thing that Terra said is that when she stepped into her role, it was a literal dumpster fire. Now, some of us have been there and you don't know how to get out of the dumpster fire. So she shows how you could walk in to the biggest problem and come out successful.
That's true. In case you think this is all like roses and lilac, right? She paints the picture that she had to climb from there to here. Anyway, the story is amazing. I think the interview was great. And Amanda, I could not be happier that this is the way that we begin Season 2, Episode 1, New Year. Let's go.
Let's do it. Today is a celebration of the Washington State Bar. We have President Francis Adewale, Executive Director Terra Nevitt, and of course, Patrick is a past president of the Washington State Bar. Francis is a founding member of the Washington State-wide Reentry Council and a board member of the Northwest Immigrants' Rights Project. He is the executive president of AHANA, Eastern Washington's preeminent multi-ethnic business association. He is also an assistant public defender in Spokane. During his presidential term, Francis created a podcast for the WSBA, Voices of the Heroes of Justice, with the first episode featuring Terra. Terra joined the WSBA in 2014, working with the Washington State Access to Justice Board, and became executive director in 2019. She began her legal career as an immigration attorney and program director for the Catholic Refugee and Immigration Services in Seattle. She also previously served as the executive director of Law Advocates, a civil legal aid organization in Bellingham, Washington, and consulted with ECPAT International in Bangkok, Thailand, an international network of non-governmental organizations working to end the sexual exploitation of children. I'm so happy to be surrounded by my friends from the Pacific Northwest. Welcome, Terra and Francis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I want to start at the very beginning. We're going to start with Francis. Why did you want to be a lawyer?
That's a very good question and an interesting one. My desire to be a lawyer was out of necessity, out of an experience that happened personally to me and my little brother, who is also a lawyer, by the way. And the two of us just happened to have an experience that really impacted us. It's out of a trauma, really, because we were following our grandpa to his farm one day, and in Nigeria, in Africa. It was on the 31st of December, 1983. There was no idea that the military have taken over government in Nigeria. And so myself and my little brother, who I said is also a lawyer, Boye Williams, and we were going with Grandpa to the farm, and then we were stopped because there is a military rule that had just taken over the country, and there was a curfew that says everyone has to stay home. We did not have a clue. So they accosted my grandpa, and they beat him and arrested him and arrested me. I was just a young man at that time. My little brother was a lot smarter than I. He ran. They couldn't catch up with him. He outran the military folks that were arresting me and my grandpa. So they took us to an holding cell, and I just felt they never charged him. They never charged him for any crime. It was impunity writ large. And they got away with it, and they did what they wanted to do, and that was it. And so it was a traumatic experience. And so from that day on, myself and my little brother had a desire to want to right the wrong of that day. We talked about it very frequently too. And my grandpa has since, passed away, but his memory, he was quite a very strong person, and it didn't break him, but it really was a time in which I said, I would never, ever let this happen to anyone. So that's what brought me to law.
Well, it also explains why everything about your background and what you have been doing is public service oriented. So thank you for being able to take that trauma and turning it into putting good in the world and sharing your story so that people know that, so that they can put good as well.
Thank you.
Now, Terra, no pressure. Why did you want to be a lawyer?
Oh my, it's difficult to follow Francis. His story
For sure.
is so moving, and I've had the chance to hear him tell it a few times, and I've often seen people move to tears by his telling of his background. My approach to the law came through a different path. I actually didn't know I wanted to be a lawyer until probably midway through undergraduate school. My family definitely instilled in me a sense of, public service, that our lives are to be lived in service to others. My dad was an optometrist in the small town that I grew up in. And originally, I thought I would be a doctor, and I went to undergraduate school at the University of Washington to study to be pre-med. And I soon learned that I was not as good at math as I thought I was. And I was really bad at chemistry. I did not have the attention to detail for chemistry. Then I switched majors to another passion that I had growing up, and I was a drama major for a little while. And then eventually I took a class on the philosophy of human rights, and that kind of got me hooked on the idea of the law. That made me feel like that was where I wanted to put my passion, was into human rights.
I love both of your stories. These are important journeys to get to where you are now. For Francis, one of the things that is obvious, and it's, you and I have traveled around to bar conferences across the country, and you neither look like nor sound like the average state bar president. Even in Washington State, which is a very diverse state, you don't sound or look like the average bar president. I'm wondering if you can just give us a little more detail about your journey to be president. And I certainly now understand where you came from, and I understand your reasons why you wanted to be a lawyer. But how did you get to be a bar president? How did you get the state behind you to elect you as a bar president?
I tell everyone that I'm one of those bar presidents that didn't come through a big law firm. I came through the public service. I came through the Access to Justice movement. Before I became bar president, I was the Access to Justice board chair for our state. I've been involved in bar access, access to justice issues in our state, in my county, here in Spokane, Washington, and in statewide. Amanda was talking about the fact that Governor Inslee appointed me 3 times to the statewide reentry council because it was one of those things that I was passionate about, having access, giving access to justice for people that I even giving access to everything of life to those who have been in prisons and jails all throughout our state. We wrote the statewide reentry council policies for our state. We did a lot of work in lifting the barrier that is stopping people from reentering into the society. Today, we are one of the first states that have someone that have been through the prison, through the reentry experience, serve as a state representative. She was one of the first members of the statewide reentry council in Washington State. So I came through a very non-traditional pathway to bar presidency, and I also do not practice in Superior Court. I practice 90% of my practice is in district and municipal court, is in the lower court, and so but I've always been a community activist. I have always looked at bar leadership. I've always looked at the profession as an essential to a community lifting. If our community is going to survive, the rule of law have to survive. I believe in the ideals of the American democracy. I take no bone about that. I really strongly believe in this country. I believe it's the last hope for the world to care about humanity. And every time we have dropped the ball as a nation, the whole world suffers. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
So Terra, you share a love of access to justice with Francis, and that was your entryway into the Washington State Bar. Can you talk about how you found your way onto that board and then ultimately becoming the executive director?
Well, I credit, there was a community leadership academy that actually was created in part by the Access to Justice Board. And I was lucky enough to be part of the inaugural class while I was the executive director at Law Advocates in Bellingham. And that got me thinking about and seeing myself in having a larger impact. And I had a mentor who made me aware that the position at the bar that worked with the Access to Justice Board, so I wasn't a member of the board, I was the staff liaison to the board, that position was going to be opening up. So I applied for, and I was successful in getting that position. And things just kept happening at the bar. There were a lot of disruptions. And I guess I was in the right place at the right time, and I was willing to put my hand up and say, I think I'm up for this challenge. And so after being with the bar for about a year and a half, I became the interim director of advancement, which is a senior leadership position working on a variety of areas, not only access to justice, but diversity, equity, and inclusion, continuing legal education, a few other things. And then, shortly after that, the executive director position became open, and I served as interim and ultimately was selected to remain in the role.
All right, I got to put a little more flesh on the bones here for this, because you were so good about that. But there's so many important things that happen. And I know some of this being a member of, the bar and being in the leadership. But Terra, you came in a really turbulent time. You came in a turbulent time when some portion of the bar decided that there shouldn't be bar dues anymore, and that maybe the bar wasn't as relevant or necessary anymore. You came in at a time when the executive director, who'd been famous across the country and certainly very well known in Washington, was dismissed by a board who disagreed with the direction, which was a shocker for everyone. And then you took over as this interim position. Here's my question for you. What skills, what path did you use to both maintain a bar that was in turbulence and then sustain a bar towards a path for the incredible success you've had? What does leadership look like for you in doing that? Because I think there's lessons to be learned for bar executives and for presidents who are, trying to surf through really challenging waters right now. And maybe there's a story there that you can share.
Yeah, thank you. It was certainly a rough time. I used to tell people that it was literally felt like a dumpster fire. Like I've never felt a better use of that term. Everywhere you looked, there were broken relationships. And I also felt like, and I would sort of say this jokingly to people, but there was also a grain of truth in it that it can only get better, right? Like I'll be here and it's got to climb out from here. I think, there were a few things. I would say that my nature is to be a pretty collaborative leader. And I think that was really important because the job number one was to fix all of the broken relationships. And that doesn't happen overnight. That took a long time. And I didn't do that alone. There were many people helping me. But it required the focus and listening to a lot of people and trying to find the common ground between us all. I also think that one of my superpowers is that I can often see the path forward. And when a lot of people are sharing a lot of different ideas and concerns, sometimes it'll just happen that something will just click. And I'm like, okay, this is what we got to do. So I think that's just a fortunate skill that I have. Another thing that I think was really important, I'm sort of grounded in optimism. Sometimes perhaps unearned optimism or unrealistic optimism. But I think that was really important because there were some very difficult times. There were lawsuits, there were stories in the newspaper, and one thing that I always find about change, and the people who I work with have heard me say this so many times, but I feel like one of the most challenging things about change is that first you do the hard work of listening and problem solving, and you start implementing the change, and you feel so accomplished. Like, okay, I've heard, I've solved, I'm doing it. But still it takes much longer for people to notice that you've made the change and to feel the impact of that change. And so that time period when you're working so hard and you feel like you've done all the things, but people are still like griping and criticizing. And, I cried at my desk lots of times. But, I think it's just in my nature to sort of, get back up the next day and say like, okay, things are going to be better. So let's get back at it.
I think sometimes Tara doesn't tell the whole story sometimes because she's very humble. One thing that she has done that she did that really helped Washington State Bar Association is that she hires well. I think that if you surround yourself with executive leadership team that are very competent, that are not based on, oh, this is my friend, let me bring my friend in, or this is the board members, the board of governors thinks, the board of trustees think, oh, this person will be a good fit. Hey, there is a phone call. Go meet Tara. Tara would give you a job. If you really competently hired, you will have success. And I want to encourage executive directors all over the country to look into pushing back against trustees, governors that thinks like, look, we cannot just place anybody to work with you. You don't have a say on who is going to be serving with you. I think what the Washington State Bar Association has done well was to let the ED be in control of that process, the people that you're going to work with.
Well, let me piggyback on that last response, Francis and Terra. I hear as I talk to bar presidents across the country, questions about how executive directors and presidents, stay in their lane. Like, how do you not cross through each other? How do you work together instead of each other's way? How do you, as a volunteer president, get to do what you want to do when there's executive directors controlling the bar? And I'm wondering, Terra and Francis, I'd like you to follow up on this from your perspective. The Washington State Bar has been so successful. You two have been such a great combination. Terra, how do you divide up those duties between the executive director and the president? What takeaways can I give other bar presidents who are heading into this job?
Yeah, I think, and I want to caveat that I think it can be different for organizations of different sizes. The Washington State Bar, we're a mandatory bar. We have 130 something employees. That may look very different if your only employee is the executive director. So I just want to be clear about that. But in an organization of our size and the high level way that we divide it up is that the board is responsible for policy, vision, strategic direction. And the president is the leader of that board. Now, they're also the leader of the bar, but one of their primary functions is to facilitate the work of the board. And in addition to that, they are the spokesperson for the organization. And the executive director's job is to run the day-to-day operations, supervise the staff, and also to implement the strategic plan. And that can mean that I am also establishing policies, making decisions, but anything that I'm doing is operational in nature, or it is in service of the vision and the strategy that the board has set. And I also want to add something that I think is really important is that if the relationship is working well, then I am seeking the president's input and feedback and advice about my area of responsibility. And the president is seeking my advice on their area of responsibility.
Right. I'm in total agreement with that. And I think that personally, let me talk about myself. The question about how I found myself into bar leadership the answer to that question is about the investment the bar has made in me. It's about the investment that other bar leaders have made in me. I was really blessed to be part of the WLI, Washington Leadership Institute, which is the first bar leadership institute in the whole nation. And the visionary for that program really looked into investing in people that look like me. They wanted people that look like me to be at the table, to be part of bar leadership. And they provided training, exhaustive training on issues like this, on challenges like that, that to prepare us for leadership. So that when you eventually get to leadership, you know where the policies are, where your limits are, where you can work with. And then the leadership academy that Terra attended, I also attended this. And most importantly, NCBP, I was part of the cohort that NCBP invested in diversity leadership, that I was part of it. I gained a lot. I gained a lot from attending that diversity leadership opportunity. So all of these play a role. If we as bar leaders invest in future leaders before they get there, it redounds to our benefit. And it helped out. One of the things that Tara and I have been able to do, the moment I got into leadership, I think I was a treasurer of the bar at that time. I hated the idea that every president come in every year and they have their own vision and their own direction. So we do this yearly strategic visioning and everything. I was like, what kind of organization is this? How can you shift focus every year? So one of the things that I really talked about was this issue. And Tara was like, you need to speak to your other governors. This has been and so we started having this conversation, and we're so lucky that Sunita, who is the immediate past president, was also on the same page with all of us. So it was easy because we have like minds, and we said we're moving away from 1 year strategic formulations every year. We're going to go into a 3-year cycle. Regardless of who is the president, there's continuity in leadership. We can't keep doing all of these things over and over again. And that makes a world of difference. I learned that from WLI. I learned that from Washington Leadership Academy. And it's really very important that we invest in leadership training for boards, board of governors, board of trustees in our bar leadership. And the pipeline to leadership has to go through training, not happenstance.
Well, and the two of you are modeling for all other bars such good governance, because if you are a bar that's lucky enough to have staff and you're lucky enough to be in good times, then sometimes you forget to look at the budget and you forget to do strategic plans, because as long as everything's on course, we don't have to change anything. And then when there's a problem like COVID or a hot topic happens where your members are demanding a response, it's really hard to train people to care about governance at that time. So thank y'all for what you did. I know that there were hard times. And I have to think, Terra, that one thing that helped you with your resilience is that you're a lawyer. Not all executive directors of bars are lawyers. So sometimes there's a disconnect maybe between why do I think access to justice is important and what does the staff understand about doing it? So I'm guessing that your background of that public service, working on human rights, that helped so that your board also understood that you bought into the initiatives.
Well, I certainly think that being a lawyer is helpful. Absolutely. And I'll elaborate. But I also want to say, in general, I'm in favor of eliminating unnecessary barriers. So I don't think you have to be a lawyer to do the job. But, obviously understanding the nature of the legal profession, understanding the challenges that the profession faces, understanding the culture, that is absolutely critical. Now, do you have to be a lawyer to know those things? No. But you do have to devote yourself to knowing those things. And I think the other point is that I do think that it helps your credibility. And again, I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but I do think that our profession, has a lot of, I don't know how to put it, we like other lawyers. We respect other lawyers. I think sometimes we're a little leery when other folks are giving us advice. Now, do I think that's how it should be? Not really. But I do think that if you're a lawyer, you sort of come in with a little more credibility. So you have a little bit of a leg up.
So one of the unique things about Washington, and I guess maybe sort of unique things, it's a trait that we're shared in bars across country, is that you're a mandatory bar. And at the national conference, we have members that are national bars, affinity bars, voluntary bars, and mandatory bars. The mandatory bar piece can be challenging because every last lawyer in your state must belong to the bar. So when you're taking actions, Terra as ED or Francis as president or your bar, you have to do something on behalf of all lawyers. And in this day and age, being a mandatory bar has made work very challenging because we're in political turmoil. There are reds and blues and purples. There are things that no one ever thought were political before and suddenly are being made political. Things like DEI or rule of law sometimes become controversial when they never have been controversial really before. And yet, Washington State has been very successful in their programs. And I'm wondering if you can share with bar presidents and executive directors across the country, particularly those in mandatory bars, how have you been successful maintaining the duty, the charter, the mission of the state bar, despite changing and shifting sands of political behavior in states like Washington?
Well, I think it is a challenging time. And it has been for a while. I mean, my understanding, having looked into the history, is that since the integrated mandatory bar was started in like the 1930s, lawyers have been challenging it. So there has always been, nobody likes to be told what to do or told where they have to join or what they have to pay. So I think it's always been a little bit fraught. There have always been challenges. And right now we are in a time when it feels like those challenges are particularly high. I think, first of all, we need to start from a place of respecting the First Amendment and people's individual rights. And so that makes it, to me, that makes it a little bit easier to grapple with. I'm not sort of annoyed by these pesky, First Amendment issues. They're important issues. And it's our job to respect them. And then I think, starting with that orientation, we work really hard to root everything that we do in the case law, in the court rules that govern us, in our mission. And we also often will play devil's advocate and ask ourselves, if someone was going to take a contrary position to what we're taking, how would we feel about that? Do we think that would be reasonable? So we really sort of challenge ourselves to have the integrity that no matter who was in this seat, this would be appropriate. And then the last thing is that we really do try to think about a message. Well, we think a lot about the message and the specific words that we're using. We just don't take that lightly. And we really try to think about what is the message that will resonate with the most number of legal professionals, not because it's so watered down that we're not saying anything, because what's the point of that, but that we're speaking to shared values. So we may have different political beliefs, but hopefully we all believe in fairness. We all believe in that, everyone should follow the law and that we should use the courts as the resolution of our disputes. And so we try to really root things in those values.
Yes, I agree. I'm in total agreement with what Tara said. And I think that there is a myth out there that, Washington is blue. That's why they can say whatever they want to say and get away with a lot. It's not true. We actually agonized over every issues because we want to be fair. We want to be balanced. We want to ensure that we carried everyone along. We don't just perfunctorily decide, hey, we're going to issue the statement and that is it, because we don't care what red says or what blue says. We really cared about unity in the bar. We cared about our members. We really deeply care about our members. And so we take a lot of pain. The Board of Governors sit down and we weigh all the issues. And the myth is, oh, Washington State is blue. It's not. There is a big swath of Washington State that is as red as Mississippi or Oklahoma. That's red. And they vote their values. We have to, take their values into consideration. And there is a huge part of our state that are very, very, in fact, bluer than New York. I always tell people, when people think that, oh, New York is blue, no. Seattle is more bluer than anywhere else. There is that balance in our state where you got to think about all that. But we always come back to the value that this bar association owed there. And the the court rules that guide us said the only thing, one of those things that we cannot do is that we cannot engage in foreign policy. We can't do that. We don't do that. That is expressly forbidden by the court rules that set us up. Other than that, if it has to do with any local issues, I mean, Terra and I issued a statement with titled Minneapolis is a call to all legal professionals to uphold the rule of law. We issued that statement. And when we were writing that statement as individuals, we were talking to each other. We were addressing a letter to each other. And we were, sometimes very late in the night, we were talking about this, about that, because we want to be heard. Just as every member of the bar want to be heard, we should also allow leaders to be heard. We also have an opportunity to be able to speak our mind. Just because we are leaders doesn't mean that we have to shut up and stay quiet. We also have an opportunity to be able to speak. The First Amendment right is for us, whether as leaders or as followers. And that if your values guide you, people will understand. They will not take offense because they know that you are coming from the right place. You're not just aggrandizing, just try to make people feel, they don't belong, that they are little. No, you're not trying to belittle people. You're trying to you are calling to the better angels of ourselves, So I believe that is where, the truth lies. If we all lift each other up and let everybody be able to have a say. I always write in my presidential column, I want your input. Respond to me. I will publish it. I would let you be heard. Just as I'm here, you are hearing me. I want you, if you write anything, our bad news editor will publish it. So you have a platform, just as I have a platform. Everybody has a platform.
If I could just follow up briefly, I agree with everything Francis said. And I also want to clarify that what we put in that statement is not everything that I think as Terra Nevitt. If it was Terra Nevitt writing a letter to my family, I might have written something very different. And I think we take very seriously that we come in with our own values, but ultimately we have a role to play. And so when we're working on a statement, I'm thinking about what is best for the bar, what is appropriate for the executive director and the president. It's not necessarily exactly what I personally think, but it is certainly informed by my personal values.
Well, and that's part of the good governance, right? It can't be that whoever the head and the face is that year, that they make all of the decisions in a vacuum. So, Francis, when you talked about how just because you're the president, you don't pick everything, well, you can't because you represent all the lawyers of your state. And I think for some who wonder, why didn't that person shout loud enough? Why didn't they post on social media? Well, first, 0 people's minds have ever been changed by one ranting social media post. But second, when you lead an organization, you lead everybody, and you have to do exactly what y'all are talking about to bring them all together, or it doesn't work, even if that maybe waters down a little bit of what it is that you personally would want to shout from the rooftops. So, Francis, we are coming towards the end of your term. What are you most proud of having accomplished as president?
I can go all over the states and speak to members of the bar. One of the most important, I happen to be the president at a time when the nation is striven with divisions and all kind of stripes. And it's a good opportunity to be able to speak to what brings us together. What makes this nation strong? What makes this nation what it is the ideal. It was Robert Penn Warren that once remarked that being an American is not a matter of blood, it is a matter of an idea. And history is the image of that idea. Every one of us as Americans have to live the truth of the Declaration of Independence. To be the president in the year where we are celebrating the 250 years of that is just a golden opportunity for me to go all across the state. I'm in Pacific Island County. I'm in, Vancouver, Washington. I'm in Bellingham. I'm all over the country, all over the state, talking to people about the rule of law, letting people understand that the faith and confidence in the judicial system trumps everything. It's so important. The checks and balances in the Constitution is so pivotal to democracy. And that is the joy that it just, I never shy away from an opportunity to be able to speak to the members of the bar, to speak to communities all across the state. So that's the highlight of my year. We have an event we call Speak Up for Justice, where we try to get lawyers as ambassadors in their community to stand up for the rule of law. That is the joy that I have, to be able to train lawyers to go out there and speak like other human beings are not in legalese. Let us speak to their community about the rule of law and about defending the independence of the judiciary. It's so important, and I'm so glad that I get to do this year. I have no regret whatsoever. I was really very concerned when I step into leadership as president. Oh my God, am I going to be accepted? Is everybody going to welcome me? They have. It's amazing the kind of support I've received all across the state. And in places in which you don't think people that look like me, that speak like me with an accent as thick as the Southern New York accent that I have, I always talk about the fact that sometimes my accent is actually the reason why people want to pay attention to me and listen to me much more carefully. So it's been fun. It's actually been very good experience for me personally.
Well, your vision of the world, the way you've brought up, the strife you've had to go through, being in this country and talking about democracy as we perhaps don't always see it from your perspective. I think it's very, very powerful, Francis, in the way only you can deliver that. And this program where you travel around the state with local judges and local attorneys and talk about things like the rule of law and the court system and the integrity of the courts, I think is critical. And I might add that one of the many things that the Washington State Bar is doing, you all are the sponsor for an ABA resolution 400, the pledge that stands up for, and I've heard both of you say it, the mission of the bar, the core values of the bar, the core values of the profession, the things that hold us together as foundations. And that resolution is just that, standing up for the rule of law, for the independence of the profession, for the independence of the judiciary, right, for access to justice for all. And I think that says a great deal about you, Francis, and the legacy that you have created and are leaving with the bar, and that you have done, Terra, for sustainability, maintainability of your bar. It's a little early because we have a little more podcast to do to say, where do you go from here? But I would like to hear a little bit about Terra, about what maintaining the legacy that Francis has started looks like.
Well, when it comes to the rule of law ambassador program, I think we have a lot more planned. We started in 2015 Law Day with the swearing in across the state. And this year, a lot of places were doing that this year on Law Day, and I know some people were thinking maybe we would do it again, but we kind of thought, you know what, we did that once. Now we want to take this another step. And so this year, we asked lawyers to take a pledge to be in the classroom on Constitution Day. And we have this audacious goal of having a lawyer in every classroom in the state on Constitution Day. And in addition to that, we've put together all kinds of tools for legal professionals who are willing to go out into their communities. We have continuing education on hot topics such as immigration enforcement. We had a CLE about what a constitutional crisis looks like. We have a lot of tools and resources around how you talk to people, how you speak across difference, how you connect rather than correct. And overall, our theory for this program is that, years ago, I was going around the state with another bar president, and we were speaking to an audience that was somewhat hostile, which was kind of what was going on at that time generally, so I was fairly used to it. But in this particular room, they were being critical of our diversity, equity, and inclusion programming. And I was relatively new to the role, and I had some kind of lame response like, well, the court rules tell us that this is our work. But the president at the time, he just connected with the room. He related to the people. He shared his own experiences, his own learning journey. And I saw how powerful and effective it was. And, so we've sort of had this theory that, especially in this time where nobody knows what they can trust, and, the one thing that seems to unite all of us, despite our politics, is distrust of our institutions and distrust of each other, that the most powerful messenger is someone in your community, someone who you see at the grocery store, who you see on the sidelines of the soccer games. So it's not just me and Francis going around talking to people, it's trying to get people talking to their own communities. And so we just recently, Francis and I were both there to kick off our first ambassador cohort training. So we brought together, I think, about 10 folks, as well as 10 staff, and started working with them to create this cohort that we hope will actually go out and host events in their communities. And we hope to grow that model with a new cohort every year. So you could imagine a few years from now, we could have tens, if not hundreds, of folks out in the community talking about the rule of law.
I want to give credit to whom credit is due, because a lot of people talk about, I always relate this ambassador experience. I said the greatest ambassador of America that I've ever known was the one that I met, well, 2 Peace Corps members that I met in my village in Africa. These 2 Peace Corps members came to my hometown, and they wrote on the board the Declaration of Independence. You could see the passion and the love they have for the prose and the poetic license in the writing. We hold this truth to be seven. They know the Declaration of Independence. And when they are reading it to us in my elementary school, it's like these are words from a marble from somewhere. I actually thought it was from Greek. I didn't know it's from America. But these 2 Peace Corps members, they love their country. They love America. And they talk about the country as if, look, this is an opportunity. They said, when the founding fathers were writing this for us, that these people that look like me were not free. They explained that to me, but they require that every generation of America has to fulfill that promise. Little by little, we continue to make it better. We continue to build on it, make it better. So when I quoted Robert Penn Warren about the fact that, America is not a matter of blood. Being an America is not a matter of blood. It is a matter of an idea, and history is the image of that idea. The history of this country is about history of every generation building on the promise of the forefathers. And if we can just continue to make an impact one generation at a time, if we drop the ball, if this generation do not fulfill the call and the promise, oh my goodness, we would suffer. But there is hope. All across the country, people are standing up for the rule of law. That is why that statement that Washington State signed is so important. And I've encouraged bar leaders all across the country to embrace it, because we have a burden, a duty as the next generation, a call to make this country as free as possible for everyone, not just for a few, but for all. Justice for all. Thank you.
Francis, I feel like I just heard the most perfect speech that you're going to deliver before the House of Delegates on Resolution 400, because you just did it perfectly. Don't change a thing. I can't wait for 600 delegates across this country to hear you speak about the pledge. That was inspiring and a truly amazing story. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've been really lucky to have Francis's vision and eloquence, and he's just been a great leader this year.
Well, I'm not really sure how we could have any more questions after that. So we just want to thank you. I don't know. I mean, you are the models of good governance, of how to talk about difficult issues and bring people along. And I'm jealous, and I'm going to need an invitation to visit y'all in Washington, because pretty soon it's going to be 100 degrees where I am. So I want to come where you are and to help y'all with all your great work.
One of the goals of this podcast is to help celebrate great leadership. Those people who are role models, those people who are creating a legacy, those people who have been successful, and to share and duplicate the good work that's being done from one state to the next, so that everybody can work from the same blueprint, can see the successes and sharing them. And you guys have been a plethora of good ideas and blueprints for success and incredible models for leadership. And on behalf of the NCBP and this podcast about leading the bar, I thank you both for being exactly the bar leaders who are leading the bar and who we couldn't be prouder to spotlight.
For more great leadership and governance tips, and to see how Resolution 400 turns out, join us at the NCBP annual meeting in Chicago from July 30th through August 1st. On behalf of the National Conference of Bar Presidents, thank you for watching this episode of Leading the Bar. For more information about membership or getting involved, or attending the annual meeting, visit ncbp.org.